Welcome to NorCal Slot Car Scene. For the 2024 season, the clubs in Northern California have decided to allow the ScaleAuto Formula 9097 car to compete alongside the NSR. Today we're going to take a look at what the differences are and how the ScaleAuto performs in comparison to the NSR. Both cars represent the era of Formula One from the late 80s to the early 90s. And from the outside, they do look somewhat similar. There are, however, some significant differences. The first difference is the motor. Both are long can motors with similar RPM ratings. However, most people that have run both cars think that the ScaleAuto motor is definitely faster of the two. The gear ratio is also different. The NSR using a 10:27 ratio, while the ScaleAuto uses a 10:26 ratio. Probably the most significant difference is the wheel choice. NSR has chosen to go with air wheels, while ScaleAuto uses standard non-air style wheels. The tires are probably the best from each manufacturer, NSR using their Super Grip compound, while ScaleAuto uses their AS25. NSR offers a single body style, while ScaleAuto offers both a low nose and a high nose version. When you put the two cars side by side, it's apparent that the dimensions are a little bit different. You can see that the body of the ScaleAuto car is a bit longer than the NSR, but let's take a look at the chassis dimensions, which are a little bit more important. The chassis of the ScaleAuto car is also slightly longer than the NSR, but width-wise they're virtually the same. When I measured the wheelbase, they're also very similar. But the significant difference is the guide to rear axle distance, which is probably the most important in a slot car. The ScaleAuto being slightly longer than the NSR. In theory, a longer guide length will be more stable, but a shorter guide length will be a little bit more nimble. Another important factor in how these cars perform is obviously the weight. I first weighed the bodies and found that the ScaleAuto body was about 2 grams lighter than the NSR body. You see here that the chassis weigh about the same. However, my NSR is a race car that has about 5 to 6 grams of ballast on it, so actually the NSR is a significantly lighter chassis. There are a few other differences between the two cars. The NSR uses standard bushings which snap in place from the top into the motor pod, while the ScaleAuto uses spherical bushings, very similar to what the slotted cars use. Both cars allow for set screws to set the ride height of the body. However, ScaleAuto has them front and rear, while NSR has them only in the front. ScaleAuto also offers an optional rubber rear wing, which is much more flexible than the standard plastic wings. I used silicone adhesive to attach it, and it's now firmly in place. ScaleAuto uses the standard method for setting the front ride height: a set screw on top of the axle and a set screw on the bottom of the axle. To comply with the NorCal rules, I changed the drivetrain to that of the NSR motor, and the 10:27 gear ratio. I also used Slotting Plus flathead screws to screw the motor securely to the motor pod. The last change was to add a wood guide, set up with 0 spacers for now, and route the wire along the chassis using the built-in guides and a little bit of glue to hold it in place. As for wheels and tires, in the front I used the stock pieces, true to 17mm diameter. In the rear I used NSR F1 air wheels along with Polycar G25 compound tires. Here's the basic setup I used for my first race with the ScaleAuto car. The car was really good for the first time out, and I missed winning the race by 1.5 feet, but it did set the fastest lap time. The car was a little bit loose on corner exit at the end of the sweepers, so I talked to Ian Douglas about his setup that he used to win the race the previous week at Motown. He told me he had a little bit of tungsten ballast right behind the motor, so I'm going to try that for next time. I'm really impressed with the performance of the ScaleAuto F1 car. It will add variety to the class, and it'd be great to see NSR and ScaleAuto fighting it out for the top of the podium. That's it for now. This is Jim Rose with NorCal Slot Car Scene, and we'll see you at the races.